My sister slapped me during her wedding shopping, but unaware I was paying for her whole wedding. The sound of the slap still rings in my ears. One moment I was handing my sister a cathedral veil. The next I was standing frozen in a crowded bridal boutique with my cheek burning crimson. Everyone stared, some shocked, others pretending not to notice as she pointed toward the door and hissed, "Get out. You don't belong here." Humiliation rushed through me like wildfire. But beneath it was something colder, stronger. Because what she didn't know, what no one in that Manhattan boutique knew, was that her entire dream wedding, the Vera Wang gown, the Plaza Hotel venue, the orchid arrangements, wasn't being paid for by her. It was being paid for by me. And in that single moment, as I turned and walked out, I decided her fairy tale was about to end. My name is Audrey Mitchell, and I'm 28 years old. I never thought a day that was supposed to be joyful would turn into the moment my sister completely destroyed me. It all happened during her wedding shopping spree. We were at Kleinfeld Bridal in Manhattan, the kind of place with marble floors, champagne service, and gowns that cost more than most people's annual salaries. My sister Vanessa was standing on the elevated platform, twirling in a silk ball gown covered with Swarovski crystals. Everyone, our mother, the consultant, even a few bridesmaids, was applauding and telling her how stunning she looked. Me? I was sitting quietly in the corner, holding her Chanel purse, guarding her iPhone, and waiting for her to bark another command at me. That's how she'd always treated me, like her personal assistant, not her sister. When the consultant asked if she wanted to try a different silhouette, Vanessa snapped her manicured fingers at me. "Audrey, grab the cathedral veil from the display and hurry up. You're moving like molasses." I swallowed my pride and did what she demanded. But when I returned and carefully handed her the delicate French lace veil, she whirled around, slapped me hard across the face, and declared loud enough for the entire salon to hear, "Just leave. You're completely ruining my moment." The sting on my cheek wasn't as painful as the sting in my chest. Everyone froze. Several people gasped audibly. I felt my face burning with embarrassment, but I held back my tears. She didn't just slap me, she discarded me like I was nothing. What Vanessa didn't realize was that the black American Express card she was planning to use for all her wedding purchases, the one she was about to present for that crystal-covered masterpiece, was mine. For 8 months, she'd been spending lavishly, believing our parents were covering the expenses. But it was actually me funding everything. I was the one paying for the Plaza Ballroom, the white orchid centerpieces, even the engagement party at Le Bernardin. And right then, as I walked out of Kleinfeld with my dignity shattered, I made a decision that would change everything. As soon as I stepped onto the busy Fifth Avenue sidewalk, I pulled out my phone. My hands were still trembling from the assault, but my mind was crystal clear. I opened my Chase banking app, navigated to my account settings, and canceled the card. Just like that, every penny she thought belonged to her vanished. The revenge was about to begin. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the crisp October air. Inside Kleinfeld, I could still hear laughter and celebration, as if nothing had happened. My sister had no idea the ground beneath her designer heels was about to collapse. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Transaction declined. $18,750 attempted at Kleinfeld Bridal. I smirked. That had to be the Vera Wang gown. I leaned against a lamppost and peered through the boutique's floor-to-ceiling windows. Vanessa was at the checkout counter with her dream dress still draped over her arms, waving the black card at the consultant. "It must be some mistake," I heard her say, her voice sharp with irritation. "Run it again. I know there's plenty available on this card." The consultant tried again. Another decline. Vanessa's face flushed red and she started snapping at everyone around her. Mom stepped forward, whispering something about calling the bank, but the Kleinfeld staff weren't patient. They dealt with entitled brides before, arrogant, loud, and demanding. "Miss Mitchell," the manager finally said, his arms crossed professionally. "If you cannot complete the purchase, we'll need the gown returned to inventory. We have other appointments scheduled." Vanessa's jaw dropped. She looked like a dethroned queen being stripped of her crown in public. She turned to Mom, demanding she fix everything immediately. Mom glanced toward the entrance, probably wondering where I'd disappeared to, but I was already walking down Fifth Avenue toward the subway. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely liberated. My sister had slapped me, humiliated me, and treated me like garbage. But now she was about to face reality, Her entire fairy tale was built on my credit limit. And this was only the beginning of her downfall. I hadn't even reached my Upper East Side apartment when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. First Mom called, then Dad, then Vanessa herself. I ignored the first several calls, but when Mom rang for the 5th time, I finally answered. Her voice came through sharp and furious. Audrey, what have you done? Do you realize your sister's dress payment was declined? She nearly collapsed in the store. The entire Kleinfeld staff was staring at us like we were frauds. I kept my tone completely calm. That's not my concern, Mom. What do you mean it's not your concern? You embarrassed our entire family in front of Manhattan's premier bridal salon. You better call Chase immediately and resolve this. I laughed bitterly. There's nothing to resolve. That was my American Express card. I've been funding everything, her dress, her engagement dinner at Le Bernardin, even the deposit for the Plaza Ballroom. Every single thing she's been bragging about on Instagram has been charged to my account. Silence filled the line. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then Mom's voice returned, trembling with rage. You selfish girl. How dare you cancel payment now, right before the wedding? Selfish. I snapped. I've been draining my investment account while Vanessa treats me like her servant. Do you even realize what I've sacrificed? The confrontation was just beginning, and I was finally ready to fight back. Vanessa suddenly grabbed the phone from Mom. Her voice was absolutely screeching. You're jealous. That's what this is about. You've always been jealous of me. You think destroying my wedding will make you happy? Well, guess what? It won't. Everyone will still choose me over you. I didn't even bother arguing with her delusions. I simply said, from now on, Vanessa, you can fund your own wedding. Consider this my final gift to you. Then I hung up immediately. For several minutes, I sat on the downtown 6 train staring out the window. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was pure relief. I'd finally stood up for myself after years of abuse. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because without my financial backing, my sister's perfect plaza wedding was about to crumble piece by piece. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an automated message from the Plaza Hotel. Payment overdue. Your reservation will be cancelled within 48 hours if the outstanding balance is not received immediately. I almost laughed out loud. They had no idea I wasn't paying another cent. I deleted the message, knowing it would soon appear in Vanessa's inbox instead. By noon, the frantic calls started again. Vanessa's voice was shrill, almost panicked. Audrey, the plaza says our check bounced. What did you do to us? I spoke slowly, almost enjoying the calmness in my voice compared to her complete chaos. I didn't do anything destructive. I just stopped paying for your fantasy, that's all. She screamed into the phone. You can't do this. The wedding is in 2 weeks. The caterer, the florist, the photographer, they're all expecting payments. Everything's already been arranged. That's your problem now, not mine, I said and hung up again. Later that evening, panic began spreading through our family group chat. Relatives who had already booked flights from Chicago and Boston were asking if the wedding was still happening. Several even mentioned hearing from Daniel and Company Catering that their contract had been terminated. Apparently, Vanessa's payment to them had bounced too. By the 3rd day, her fiancé's family became involved. I heard through my cousin that they'd had a heated confrontation at his parents' Westchester home. They had genuinely believed Vanessa's family was funding the entire celebration. Now they discovered not a single bill had been paid by my parents. It was all me, all along. The whispers began circulating. If Audrey was the one paying for everything, what does that say about Vanessa's character? That evening, I received an unexpected text from her fiancé himself. Audrey, is it true you've been funding the wedding? Vanessa told us your parents were covering all expenses. I stared at my iPhone screen, debating my response. Then I typed back one simple word, yes. I didn't need to explain further. The truth was enough to plant serious doubt in his mind. And I had a strong feeling that doubt would soon explode into something much bigger than anyone expected. The dominoes were falling, and there was no stopping them now. 2 days later, I received a call I hadn't expected. It was from Blake, Vanessa's fiancé. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the tension beneath the surface. "Audrey," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty. Did you really pay for all of this? The plaza venue, Daniel and Company catering, the engagement dinner at Le Bernardin." I didn't hesitate. "Yes, Blake. Every single expense. Vanessa never contributed a dime. My parents didn't either. It was entirely funded by my investment account." There was silence for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily. "She told me her family was handling everything. She said money wasn't even a consideration. Do you understand how humiliating it was to discover in front of my parents that none of these payments were legitimate?" I could hear genuine anger creeping into his voice now. "I trusted her completely, Audrey. But lying about finances this significant, it makes me question what else she's been dishonest about." Before I could respond, Vanessa grabbed the phone from him. Her voice was sharp, desperate. "Blake, don't listen to her lies. She's jealous and vindictive. She's trying to destroy us because she's always hated me." But Blake didn't sound convinced anymore. "Vanessa, enough. I've seen the bank statements. Audrey isn't lying. You told me your parents were funding everything, and now I discover it was your sister's savings. How could you possibly think that was acceptable?" "I was going to reimburse her eventually," Vanessa cried. "You don't understand the situation. She's making this seem worse than it actually is." But Blake's voice turned ice cold. "What I understand is that we were about to begin a marriage built on complete deception. If you can't be honest about something this fundamental, how can I trust anything else you've told me?" Vanessa begged, shouted, and sobbed, but Blake had already reached his decision. By the end of that devastating call, their engagement was officially over. I sat there on my couch, phone still in my hand, absolutely stunned. Not because I felt sad, but because it finally hit me. Her entire fairy tale was collapsing, and I hadn't even lifted a finger except to cancel one credit card. The truth alone was powerful enough to bring down everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of family drama. Blake returned the engagement ring via certified mail. His parents, prominent Manhattan lawyers, wanted nothing more to do with our family. Word spread quickly through our social circles that the wedding was off due to financial deception. Vanessa locked herself in her bedroom, refusing to eat or take calls. Mom and Dad were forced to confront the reality that their golden daughter had been living a complete lie. The bills they used to automatically forward to me were now piling up on their own kitchen table: mortgage payments, credit cards, utilities. They were drowning financially, and for the first time in years, I wasn't there to rescue them. Every time they tried to guilt me into helping again, I simply repeated the same response: "You'll have to figure it out yourselves now." The princess had fallen, and I was finally free. The wedding day arrived, but instead of celebration, the atmosphere was thick with tension and embarrassment. Relatives who had flown in from across the country were gathered in the Plaza Hotel lobby, confused about why nothing was set up properly. No orchid arrangements, no catering stations, no decorations, just empty round tables and a bare stage where the band should have been performing. I walked in quietly, just to witness the aftermath for myself. Vanessa was in the corner, pacing like a caged animal about to explode. Her dress wasn't the crystal-covered Vera Wang gown she had dreamed of wearing. She'd been forced to rent a simple off-the-rack dress from David's bridal at the last minute. Her makeup was smudged from crying, and her voice was hoarse from screaming at everyone within reach. When she spotted me near the entrance, her face twisted with pure fury. You destroyed everything. This is completely your fault." Her scream turned every head in the ballroom, and suddenly all eyes were focused on us. But instead of pitying her, the relatives looked at me with curiosity, waiting for an explanation. So I gave them exactly what they wanted, the complete truth. Calmly and clearly, I addressed the room. Vanessa has been living in a fantasy world. She told everyone our parents were funding this plaza wedding, but it was me paying all along. When she slapped me and treated me like dirt, I stopped enabling her lies. I gestured toward the empty ballroom. "And this is the inevitable result." Gasps rippled through the crowd of wedding guests. Some relatives shook their heads in disappointment. A few even muttered under their breath, "She got exactly what she deserved." Vanessa's face went completely pale. She turned desperately to our parents, expecting them to defend her honor. But even they stood there silently, too embarrassed and ashamed to speak. Then came the final devastating blow. Blake, her former fiancé, walked into the ballroom with his parents. He wasn't dressed for a wedding celebration. He wore a crisp navy business suit, his expression stone-cold and determined. "I came here to tell everyone the truth myself," he announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "The wedding is permanently cancelled. Vanessa lied to me, to my family, and to all of you gathered here. I refuse to marry someone who builds her entire life on deception and manipulation." The Plaza Ballroom fell completely silent except for Vanessa's heartbroken sobbing. I stood there feeling a strange mixture of relief and newfound strength. For years, I had been the quiet, compliant one, the person who allowed her to walk all over me without consequences. But now, everyone finally saw the real truth. Her dream wedding was gone. Her fiancé was gone. And her reputation was permanently destroyed. After Blake and his parents walked out with dignity intact, the reception hall turned into complete chaos. Guests began leaving in groups, shaking their heads and whispering about how embarrassing the entire situation had become. Some even demanded reimbursement for their travel expenses, complaining about wasting time and money on a wedding that never actually happened. The fairy tale was officially over, and I was the one still standing. Vanessa collapsed into a velvet chair, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom rushed to her side, trying to offer comfort, while Dad turned toward me with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "This is entirely on you, Audrey," he snapped. "If you hadn't pulled your vindictive stunt, none of this disaster would have happened." I stood tall, refusing to flinch under his accusation. "No, Dad. This happened because Vanessa and both of you took complete advantage of me for months. I paid for everything without complaint. I sacrificed my savings, my financial future, to cover for her lies and deception. And what did I receive in return? A slap across the face. Literally." The relatives nearby nodded in agreement. They had heard everything, and I could see in their expressions that they supported my position. For once, I wasn't the one being shamed or blamed. Mom's voice cracked as she pleaded desperately, "Audrey, please just fix this mess. Pay the outstanding bills. Help your sister recover from this disgrace. We can't survive this level of humiliation." I almost laughed at the audacity. "No, Mom. I'm completely done being the family's personal ATM. You call me selfish for stopping the payments, but let's be brutally honest here. Who's really selfish? The person who paid for everything quietly, or the people who used me like a human credit card and never once said thank you?" They had absolutely no response to that truth. Right then, I made the most important decision of my life. From this day forward, I'm cutting all financial ties with this family. No more bills, no more emergency payments, no more bailouts. You'll all have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet for once. And Vanessa, she can finally discover what it's like to pay for her own dreams and fantasies. The Plaza Ballroom fell silent. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely powerful, not because I had destroyed anything, but because I had finally stopped being afraid to advocate for myself. Vanessa's sobs grew louder and more desperate, but I didn't look back. I walked out of that empty reception hall with my head held high, leaving her shattered fairy tale behind me. And deep down I knew this was only the beginning of my new, authentic life. The weeks following the ruined wedding were surprisingly peaceful. For once, my phone wasn't constantly buzzing with demands for money or emergency bailouts. Instead, it filled with messages from relatives, some offering genuine support, others gossiping about how Vanessa had become the family laughingstock. I heard through the grapevine that she tried desperately to patch things up with Blake, but he had already moved on. His family wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. Without the wedding, without the plaza venue, without her fiancé, Vanessa remained at home, bitter and completely humiliated. The girl who once bragged about being the princess of our family now avoided even going to Whole Foods because she couldn't handle the judgmental stares from former friends and acquaintances. Meanwhile, I felt lighter than I had in years. As for my parents, they were forced to confront harsh financial reality. The bills they used to automatically forward to me were now piling up on their own dining room table. The mortgage, utilities, credit card payments, they were drowning in debt they'd ignored for months. And every time they tried to guilt me back into helping, I simply repeated the same boundary: "You'll have to figure it out yourselves now." At first, they called me cruel and heartless. But over time, even their calls became less frequent. It was as if my silence finally taught them what my words never could, that I was no longer their financial safety net. Meanwhile, I felt genuinely liberated for the first time in years. I was able to keep my entire paycheck for myself. I started rebuilding my investment account, little by little. I even enrolled in a French cooking class at the Institute of Culinary Education, something I'd always dreamed of but could never afford because my money was constantly being drained by someone else's emergencies and demands. One evening, as I sat in my cozy studio apartment stirring a pot of cocoa vin, I realized something profound. I hadn't just cancelled a credit card that day at Kleinfeld. I had cancelled years of being walked on, dismissed, and completely taken advantage of. Vanessa lost her plaza wedding, her fiancé, and her pride. My parents lost their free financial ride. And me? I gained something invaluable, my freedom and self-respect. A month later, I ran into my Aunt Patricia at Dean and DeLuca. She smiled warmly and said, "Audrey, I just want you to know we're incredibly proud of you. It's never easy standing up to family, but you did exactly the right thing." Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. For years, I had carried the weight of everyone else's happiness on my shoulders, thinking that keeping peace was more important than speaking my truth. But peace bought with silence is never genuine. It's just control disguised as love. Vanessa still hasn't spoken to me since that catastrophic day. My parents maintain their distance too, their pride too wounded to admit the truth. And honestly, that's perfectly fine with me, because I've learned that family isn't defined by shared DNA. It's defined by mutual respect and genuine care. Now, every time I check my Chase account and see my savings growing steadily, every time I cook dinner in my own quiet space, every time I wake up without the burden of someone else's financial obligations, I feel stronger and more authentic. Looking back, that slap at Kleinfeld could have completely broken my spirit. Instead, it liberated me from years of abuse and exploitation. And as I move forward with my life, I know one thing with absolute certainty: sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't elaborate payback or vindictive schemes. It's simply walking away with dignity and letting people face the natural consequences of their own selfish choices. My name is Audrey Mitchell, and I finally learned to value myself. The fairy tale I saved wasn't my sister's, it was my own.